12 of Super Rugby has come and gone. It's Monday now. I'm sitting here with the two wise men, Garen, our sport editor, and our chief writer, Rob. Thank you for sitting down.
Morning, Jen.
Hi, Jen.
Happy birthday.
Thank you, Jen.
Yay. You had your birthday over the weekend, and a really good weekend with predictions as well.
Yeah, it did go well, so it fitted in quite nicely for me.
All right. Garen, why don't you take us through the first game?
Okay, so the first game was the Sharks in Melbourne against the Rebels, and it was 13th time lucky for the South African teams. The first game we've won on our overseas tours, so good news there.
Try.
Correct. So it wasn't the greatest game Rob ever played. The Sharks did enough to win. They won ugly, if you like. They scored one try. Is that correct? So it didn't even look like the threatening for a bonus point for the 4 tries at all. But they picked up the win. They stretched their lead at the top of the overall standing and the South African Conference. So it was good news for them. Their tour certainly gets a lot tougher from now, and they play the Brumbies up next before they even head off to New Zealand. So off to a good start. Jake White pretty shrewd when it comes to playing against the Australian teams, having been in charge of the Brumbies last year. So he probably knew what to expect in Melbourne. So good start for them, but not the fantastic performance. But we've sort of come to accept that from the Sharks this season. They haven't been an 80-minute team at all in any matches today, but they're just doing enough to pick up the 4 or 5 points for victories so far.
All right, Rob, your take on the match?
Yeah, Jen, the highlight really was the very good counter-attacking try that the Sharks got. It was a pity that they only got the 1 try, but I'm hoping it might be the catalyst for them to just realise that they are able to play a very vibrant sort of ball-in-hand type of rugby, because as Garen said, on the whole the game wasn't anything special. But the Sharks suddenly struck from deep in their own territory with a lovely move that Lwazi Mvovo was very involved in. He's done very well since moving to fullback for the Sharks, and his turn of pace is quite an important aspect in sort of getting the Sharks almost unexpectedly sometimes onto the front foot. And then JP Peterson rounded off the move. Also good to see him looking a little bit better again after a pretty shaky game the week before. But the Sharks do have to up their act tremendously now. They will realise that although they've beaten the Rebels and thank goodness got that first win overseas, they need to up their game still by 20 to 25%, I think, if they're to have a chance of a sort of a productive outcome for the remaining 3 tour fixtures.
All right, let's move into game 2. I want to start off with a tweet. This is from Front Row Grant. This is for the Chiefs versus the Lions. He said, Lions the best scrum in the tournament on their own ball. Chiefs just learned that lesson. Why don't you take us through that moment?
Well, that's indeed true. The Lions, they started off the season so well. The only thing they've been consistent at since then has been their scrum. It's been really, really impressive, probably the best in the tournament, as Tank Lanning or Front Row Grant says. But unfortunately on Saturday, that's pretty much the only thing that they got right. They were thumped, as we predicted last week, 38 points to 8. So it was a bit ugly on the scoreboard for the men from Johannesburg. But they were up against the 2-time defending champion Chiefs in Hamilton. Never an easy place to tour. Their first game on the tour, so now we've actually won 1 from 14 games, because after the Sharks won, the Lions stretched our defeat to 14. So wasn't great from them. I don't see them actually winning a game on this tour. It's not going to get any easier for them either. They picked up a couple of injuries, just getting it tougher and tougher. I think they're up against the Highlanders next in Dunedin. Never a nice place to tour either. So things going from bad to worse for the poor Lions. I expect them almost to finish bottom of the South African Conference and probably bottom of the overall conference as well. But their future is secure in Super Rugby, so they don't have to worry about that at least. But yeah, a tough opening game. They played with some sort of impressive. They tried to fling the ball around, at least to their credit, in the first half, and then just the second half they sort of ran out of momentum, ran out of steam, and the Chiefs ran away with the match in the second half.
Well, on a happy note, your predictions have been right so far.
Yes.
So, Rob, take me through that game.
Yeah, it was. I think Tank is correct in saying that the scrum is the one aspect that they've done really well, and I think hats off to Johan Ackerman, their coach, who's clearly a very shrewd scrummaging person, and maybe the sort of person who, if the Springboks find for any reason that they're getting into, I'm not saying it'll happen, but if for some reason they're having any scrummaging difficulties during the international season, perhaps he's not the sort of worst guy to have. Heyneke Meyer is quite an open-minded guy. If he fancies that there's another coach on the domestic scene who's particularly doing well on the sort of scrummaging front, he may well be keen on thinking of a little bit of a consultative role or something like that, or just some advice, because Johan Ackerman, with a very sort of strung together squad with very little international experience has turned them into a very good scrummaging outfit. But you do need more dimensions than that. So, you know, they've got to work on various other aspects of their game to be successful. And I still think, Garen, that there's a chance that the Lions could sink to that bottom spot in the South African Conference after a really good start. But you just feel now that they're beginning to slip, and it's now showing on the log. The Cheetahs and Stormers could overhaul them.
Wow. All right, let's go into the Stormers versus the Highlanders game. We're going to start off with a tweet again. This one is from Zelim Nel. He said, unless the Stormers are allowed 15 subs, they're going to be gassed in the final 20. Gerd?
Well, Zelim, I know he wrote that early in the game. It was a real helter-skelter start to the match, you know, players falling over all over the place. But the good news is the Stormers got back on the winning trail, even though it was only by a single point. They seem to be attacking in a more attacking frame of mind of late, which is good to see. You know, their defence last year sort of held them together, conceded very, very few tries, but they conceded 4 this weekend. I think it was 5 the weekend before against the Cheetahs. So their defence is sort of not, not as good as in previous years, but at least they're scoring some tries. So, you know, that's fantastic. They picked up a bonus point for the 4 tries. But again, the coach is all very excited about the victory. But you know, in years gone past, a 1-point victory at home against a team like the Highlanders wouldn't have been celebrated in the way it is being at the moment, which sort of reflects on the season they've had to date. You know, they're still near the bottom of the log, near the bottom of the South African Conference as well. So even though there's sort of light at the end of the tunnel now that they're back in South Africa, having finished their overseas tour, got a whole lot of matches coming up. There are tough matches against the Bulls still twice, and the Sharks to come. So interesting how it's going to finish off the season. The Storm certainly getting better. They might unfortunately sort of upset, from a South African point of view, upset the Sharks and the Bulls, who are fighting, you know, for those playoff positions. But from a purely point of view from the Stormers, you know, a good result this weekend.
All right, Rob.
Yeah, good. I think the Newlands crowd would have enjoyed it, Jen. They've seen some pretty turgid matches, not just this season, but also in the last couple of seasons, where the Stormers have been so focused on defence that they've had to really grind out lots of wins in quite an ugly fashion, even though they were much more competitive, last year and a couple of years before that. So they're still in that little sort of twixt and between sort of mode at the moment, not quite sure the balance between attack and defence, hence the fact that the score sort of, fluctuated a bit, and the Highlanders kept on coming back at them. But it made for a very good game of rugby, and that's one good thing, I think, Garen, is that if they keep playing like that and just work on perfecting the new template, it will drive fans back into the stadium. Maybe for the last few games, there are still a few good home derbies to come at Newlands, so some good signs in the game. But as Garen said, they grounded up by 1 point in the end. Everybody was out on their feet at the end, and that's the second game against New Zealand opposition, I think, because they beat the Hurricanes also by 1 point at Newlands in a game that was far sloppier than that one was. So it shows you how they're still flirting with sort of mediocrity in many ways. But let's give them some praise for upping the tempo of their game and the intensity.
All right, well, so far so good, I think. We're going to go into the fourth game, Bulls versus Cheetahs. This tweet was from Ken Borland. He says, poor decision by TMO, Marcel van der Merwe. Try disallowed due to obstruction by Matfield, but van der Merwe stepped inside of him.
Yeah, there were a couple of controversial moments in that game. The good news is, because it was the derby, we were guaranteed a South African winner.
That's why we love these derbies.
Early on in the game, it looked like the Cheetahs were actually going to run away with it. They scored a really good intercept try early on. They had a good lead, but the Bulls, to their credit, came back. Maybe the altitude got to the Cheetahs a little bit, although, playing in Bloemfontein, it's not that much different. But the crowd got behind the Bulls, and the Bulls really had to win to stand any chance of making the playoffs. And to their credit, they did pull out the victory. That moment that Ken mentioned was a bit controversial. There were actually a couple of obstruction controversies this weekend. Luckily, the TMOs in the matches were fairly consistent. They actually disallowed every try for any sort of hint of obstruction. Victor Matchell was sort of got in the way, if you like. There's just, so many players around the ruck that Heinrich Rousseau couldn't get to Marcel to tackle him. Matfield obviously didn't see him behind him, but it did look a bit messy on TV. So I wasn't surprised that it was disallowed. So a little bit of controversy there, but luckily it didn't matter in the end. The Bulls did emerge victorious.
Rob?
Yeah, again, not a bad match really. South African derbies can be sort of real do a sort of arm wrestles, and this one had some good elements of attacking play and sort of positivity generally in it. I thought the Bulls looked a little bit less predictable with Handré Pollard in the fly half channel. I thought he put up a pretty good performance. Jacques-Louis Potgieter has done well for them as well, but perhaps he's slightly more of a sort of metronomic sort of fly half, Garen. He'll kick his goals and just sort of do the sort of honest Joe tasks that you expect of a fly half. But Pollard has got that little bit of X factor as well. He's got a bit of a step on him and a good anticipator of things. So, and it also brought Francois Hoogaard into the game a little bit. He liked the fact, I think, that he didn't just have to kick sort of do box kicks all the time, which is not really his forte. He likes to be involved in sort of running play, and he did manage to get involved. So the Bulls produced a more multifaceted game, and perhaps almost sort of surprised the Cheetahs a little bit. Although the Cheetahs won't be too disheartened, they could also have won the game, and I still think that they will remain at least reasonably competitive and hopefully a fair nuisance value for the aid of other South African teams, especially when they play foreign sides, for what's left of the competition.
Mm-hmm. Well, congratulations both of you on getting 7 out of 7.
Thank you. Won't have it often.
All right, well, if you went to any of the games this past weekend, you can share your photos with us. We'll share those in a gallery or feature them on the show. There are some on the screen there now. And if you want to challenge either of these two wise men, they both got 7 out of 7 this past weekend, you can do that on Super Brew. We'll see you on Friday for week 13.